Research has long established that strong, healthy relationships have the power to influence physical and mental health for better or for worse. This is true socially and is just as imperative with colleagues and work teams. Effective working relationships can make our days and lives easier and happier. A study by Gallup has found that people who have good workplace relationships are more likely to be engaged at work. Good work relationships are also connected to increased profit and improved productivity. So how might our understanding of this fact influence the delicate relationship between entrepreneurs and investors? Sadly, too many of these partnerships become embroiled in power grabs and infighting. Either party can be overly concerned about their side of the deal. This explosive dynamic makes it difficult to work for a mutually beneficial relationship. It doesn't have to be that way. In fact, faith-driven entrepreneurs and investors can work together to find common ground. Because at the end of the day, what we're most concerned with is how we can partner together to bring glory to God's name, not just our own. Jessica shares her insights with us about what we should look for in a partner. Her perspective comes from many years of launching companies, scaling them, and then moving on to the next adventure. Through it all, she's tried to look beyond just the financial implications with a focus on loving people as the way God loves us. Let's watch.
If you ask people to tell you the goal of a startup, most would say that it's to make money, solve problems, innovate, or make the world a better place. And yes, those things are true and legitimate goals. As believers, though, in everything we do, our goal is rooted in the two greatest commandments. Love God with all your heart, with all our soul, with all our mind, and all our strength. And the second is this, to love our neighbor. So for years, I've been thinking, what would the startup journey look like if the main goal of the founder and the investors was to love people? Few people would define the entrepreneur-investor relationship as one of love. Typically, at its core, it's a transactional relationship. Entrepreneurs are building products or services to serve their customers. Investors ultimately want a return on their investment. At any moment, it may feel aligned. When our relationships are based on the value of the transaction, it is likely that the entrepreneur and investor will be on completely different sides at some point. They are driven by different goals from that transaction. This difference is the root of misaligned expectations, which causes tensions, games, and dishonesty. I believe there's a better way. So I'm the co-founder and CEO of my third startup. Each venture was backed by investors ranging from angel investors to venture capital. My perspective on the entrepreneur-investor relationship has progressed as my deep understanding of redemptive entrepreneurship has grown. As a sophomore in college, I started my first company out of my dorm room. It was a baked goods company called Jessica's Wonders with an unforgettable slogan. It was, so good, it'll make you wonder. I know. It all started with a random moment when I walked into a local pizzeria and saw this banana bread on sale. It was plastic wrapped with a handmade $1.69 on it. And I told the owner that I could do so much better than what he was selling, and he challenged me to bring something in. So I brought in my first banana bread loaf in, and he sold out. I brought in more, and he sold out again. And before I knew it, I was selling to all the hotspots around campus. And by senior year, I ended up raising $1 million from investors and grew the business to national distribution with several million in revenue. It was an incredible and raw experience. But I didn't intend to start a business. I was just a college student majoring in anthropology, trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. I was also a new and very eager young Christian. So when I realized I had a thriving business on my hands, I thought the whole purpose was to just share my belief in God. So I displayed my baked goods in baskets and made signs out of construction paper and markers. Every sign had the John 3:16 verse written out. I'll never forget when the Wall Street Journal interviewed a few entrepreneurs and asked us about our favorite business book. Do you know what I said? People like Bill Gates share their top-selling leadership titles, and I felt the need to say the Bible. And the Wall Street Journal actually printed it. Couldn't believe it. Now, I laugh now at these examples of my innocence and good intentions. The way I expressed being a Christian and an entrepreneur at that time was by slapping verses on products and mentioning my faith at every opportunity. During my second venture, I realized it's more integrated than that. The way I treat my employees and how we impact our consumers' lives went beyond the product itself. That has never been as true as it is for my current venture, IoniCare, a solution to support family caregivers as they navigate care in the home. My dad and I were thrust into being my mom's full-time caregiver as she battled pancreatic cancer for 7.5 years. As my parents moved in with me and my family, I was forced to quit my job to become their primary caregiver. I managed all of her medical care, performed nursing duties, and juggled all the financial and coordination logistics. It was the hardest and loneliest time in my life. And after she passed away in my deep grief, my eyes opened up to the 54 million family caregivers in the US alone who are the invisible backbone of our entire healthcare system and society. These people are untrained and unsupported family members taking care of a loved one with a prolonged illness, special needs, disability, or aging in their home. They are exhausted, they are desperate, and they feel so alone. In this highly emotional state, they need to make tough decisions and spend a lot of money with a lack of direction or transparency. And our aha moment was discovering there are thousands of resources and services that already exist hidden in our local resources, employer and health plan benefits, and even in our own personal social circles. So my co-founder, Steve Lee, and I combined our skills and personal experiences as caregivers to create a tech and human solution that organizes and mobilizes all the layers of support needed in the home. Having found myself in their shoes and knowing how hard that journey was, empathy came naturally. But it wasn't just empathy alone that led me to start IoniCare. It was empathy as an expression of love. I had to ask myself, am I observing, researching, and trying to understand my end user to make their lives better? Or to grab an insight into what would lead them to a purchase? Is my intent to acquire them or to truly care for them? This intent colors the lens through which we view and interpret their needs and desires, and it shapes what we do with the insights we get. The goal of making something people want is very different from making something people want that will also lead to their flourishing. Empathy-driven insights is a proven method to understand consumer needs in order to get them to purchase. If my approach is rooted in empathy alone, I could take advantage of my understanding of this desperation to create a service that purposely made them dependent on us. I could easily require our service to be the connector. Some would say, that's a great business model because we wouldn't be cut out of the transaction. But if I'm driven to leverage that empathy and understanding to truly love, then I would create a service that empowered the consumer. They would have all the knowledge they needed to make the best decision for their family, even if it meant they no longer needed us. Building sustainable systems of support is the only way to truly care long-term and address the deep isolation that exists. With both approaches, you could prove through early testing and feedback that caregivers wanted a given service. However, the test is what happens after the purchase. If your goal is to love, you will take that deep empathetic insight and create the product that allows them to flourish beyond the purchase. This is the difference between a transactional relationship and a relationship built on love and genuine partnership. It is only possible to truly create a redemptive venture in this way if all people involved are treated as partners. This is especially true of the investor-entrepreneur relationship. Through all three of my ventures, what ended up being a key factor was the fundraising and alignment with investors. I used to think investors were needed to simply fund the great product and idea, but the funding strategy and investors were either the accelerant or the roadblock to achieving our ultimate mission. Love comes down to people. It's common knowledge that business success is dependent on the people behind it. There are countless books and talks about the importance of management and leadership. As CEO, I saw firsthand the impact of a leader's personal values, mood, choice of words, and reactions to all the crazy situations, whether you know it or not, whether you want it or not. Who you are and what you do as a leader makes such a difference to your team. Our culture puts so much emphasis on the power of leadership. Take ownership, be confident, make clear and tough decisions. But what about love? What does it mean to love your team as a leader? It's common to think of employees as people you pay to get something done. Especially when I was paying my first team members from my own personal savings, I wanted them to be as dedicated as I was. I wanted them to stay up all night with me and sacrifice their free time. But I soon learned that I don't own them. Investors can experience something similar. Are there entrepreneurs and businesses in which you have invested capital solely there for your own gain? Are they simply the jockey for the horse that you bet on? Do you care about the people in the business as much as the profit they bring you? Are you loving the performance and productivity of your investments? Or are you loving the people on the other side of the money? It's hard to see people through God's eyes when the relationship is built on performance expectations, but that's exactly what we're called to do. I've learned to see people with a long view and keep the perspective that our time together is part of a bigger journey. I tell employees, you know what? I don't expect you to work here forever. I know that you have your own path and aspirations. You're an important part of this company's vision, but what is your own vision for yourself, and how can I help you get there? This message is often met with surprise. One of my product managers said he ultimately wanted to be a business professor. It was not something I would have guessed if I didn't take the time to listen. And that conversation helped me give him opportunities to gain the skills and perspective he needed to move forward in God's path for him. He was one of my most effective teammates. Frank Chen of Andreessen Horowitz expresses a similar view of investing, what he calls seeing your role as an investor as a servant leader. So often we think of the relationship between entrepreneur and investor as a constant power struggle. But Mr. Chen is upending that idea and offering a much more redemptive and selfless approach. When I think of how this type of relationship works in my own life, I often think of Christine, my second venture's co-founder. I read somewhere that 7 out of 10 times the co-founder relationship can create tremendous stress that ruins the potential of a company. So I wanted to be super intentional about this relationship. Christine and I made a vow to each other that we would always make sure we were aligned. Our friendship took priority over the possible success of this venture. We asked each other 200 hard questions to uncover sensitive topics, potential issues, and shared values. And yes, I did say 200. And there were things like, what if an investor wanted to invest, but only if I fired you? What if we only had money to pay one person? What if one of us started doing unethical things? How would we handle it? We couldn't predict all the situations, but our transparent conversations aligned our values and mindset. And we were able to draw upon these conversations when unexpected situations came up. And believe me, there were many. Despite us departing the business in its last stages, Christine is one of my closest friends in life, and our relationship is stronger than when we first started the business. Regardless of whether an investment or venture succeeds or fails, what people will remember is how people treated one another and how it felt to be part of it. When we talk about things like love and empathy, it's hard to discern where those come into the fundraising process. But if we want to redeem relationships, specifically those between entrepreneurs and investors, we can start by being very transparent and real about some of the tensions that exist. These unspoken subtleties form a relationship based on distrust or gamemanship. We should work towards transparency and finding a true partner that shares your desires to create and impact the world. If we ask faith-driven entrepreneurs to root themselves in love and purpose, then the same should be said for faith-driven investors. Christian investors and entrepreneurs alike should seek to build a sustainable venture that enables people to flourish. Without that partnership, it's almost impossible to achieve our goals. Now, this sounds great on paper, but in practice, it's not always that simple. When we dig into the fundraising process, a big part of it is figuring out the size of the opportunity and the expected projections. Is the market big enough? Are you the team I trust to get there? How are you going to do it? Investors want a very large market with fast growth. The venture capital business model is typically built on one of their 10 investments being a unicorn. On the other hand, entrepreneurs want to be realistic in their goals and projections. From their perspective, this is the one venture that is going to impact their personal lives. I know this from experience. We don't have a portfolio of options like investors do. This is the one thing we're gonna go all in on. We're being practical and realistic with what we can achieve so we can align our day-to-day operations. But at the same time, there's pressure to show that you're building a rocket ship. I remember presenting projections for Ionic Hair, and the feedback was, well, that's just not big enough. That's not aggressive enough. At the time, I was talking about 40 to 50 million in revenue in 4 years, and it still wasn't big enough. I was tempted to stretch those numbers to get the investment, but I knew that would be wrong, not just from a practical perspective, but from a relationship building perspective. I didn't want investors to get involved with me because they thought they could get something from me that I wasn't sure I could deliver. Still, there's this tension that if you don't present a big enough opportunity where everything is up and to the right, then you might not even get that meeting. This is where posturing becomes a very, very real dynamic. On the investor side, FOMO, right? Fear of missing out, is one of the most influential factors that dictate their actions. Everyone wants to get in on the hot deal, whatever that may be, because they trust the market and it adds credibility to the firm or their reputation. On the entrepreneur side, everyone wants to prove they are that next unicorn. They want to say that they're going to be the one with the unique advantages. They'll hustle to crush Red Bulls against their foreheads as they build the next billion-dollar business. Problem is, both parties are posturing to be more interested and bigger than they truly are, just for the chance to get a transaction done at the moment. As an entrepreneur, you can't be someone you're not just in order to get the deal. As an investor, you can't pretend to care about the mission and vision of an organization when your only goal is street cred and capital. Why not? Because those are the foundations built on sand that begin to shift and fail as a relationship moves forward. When an entrepreneur has put on a front just to get an investment, it's only a matter of time before the reality of the situation is found out. And for an investor who is only in it for the money, there eventually comes a time when a personal and relational decision has to be made that will reveal everyone's true colors. Similar to any other part of the operation, funding has to respond and react to overcome roadblocks. If there is no vision or belief in the mission, the approach will be stunted to what was initially expected, and investors will tend to walk away when it veers off track. Faith-driven investors and entrepreneurs can address these common tensions in a transparent way in order to achieve the bigger impact of what we're creating. We can also pursue a relationship where we see the other person as a human versus my one chance at a home run or my vehicle for funding. Ultimately, we can seek true partnership. If building a redemptive venture is a shared goal, how do we ensure we create a redemptive partnership to achieve that? Christians have the opportunity to model how we can avoid the pitfalls and dynamics that tear businesses, investments, and relationships apart. If you think about it, a lot of the investor-entrepreneur relationship can be compared to a healthy marriage. You don't posture and pretend with your partner. If you do, you're committing to a life of make-believe forever. Instead, both parties should come to the table with honesty and empathy. We should be asking what we are going to build together. Why do we want to build it? Are we aligned on this practice and this idea? Where are our boundaries? How do we define success, and how will we react when we experience failure? That's our greatest chance of actually making it succeed. It comes down to having a partner-partner relationship. We're in this together type of mentality. Like we mentioned earlier, entrepreneurs and investors are coming into the business with two different perspectives. For the entrepreneur, this is their life. It's their one business, the sole thing they're dedicating time and energy to. For the investor, this business is only one part of a larger portfolio. Even aligning on something as simple as that can help clear up so much confusion. Recognizing the difference in how both parties view this particular opportunity and investment will clearly communicate what is expected. I love it when investors share their portfolio strategy with me and how my venture fits into it. It also helps to get aligned on time expectations. If an entrepreneur is thinking about growing the business over the course of several decades, whereas the investor only plans to stay involved for the next 2 years, conflict is going to follow. Being transparent about where the fund is in its life cycle and what drives their decisions will also help manage the various funding sources. Entrepreneurs have to think about respecting the various models that represent the respective shareholders. Investors, however, only have to prioritize their own goals. A lack of transparency about what all the parties hope to achieve, as well as an unclear understanding of how each person plans to contribute toward that goal muddies the waters and makes a healthy relationship nearly impossible. Entrepreneurs shouldn't then walk into pitches hoping that all investors should say yes. They should expect mismatches and look for a true partner, and that means you're going to get no's. Investors shouldn't pretend to be super interested in investing when all they hope for is the option for a unicorn. They should look for a true partner to build solutions for problems that address their convictions. Both parties need to be able to look each other in the eye and speak the truth about what's really going on. There needs to be unity around the purpose of the business, empathy toward one another as we work together to meet our goals, and transparency on how we want to do whatever it is we're going to do. Very rarely do these virtues shine through in meetings between entrepreneurs and investors. Instead, what typically happens in these meetings is a pitch or a sale going up against an assessment or a judgment. It's more like a face-off instead of two parties searching for shared convictions where investors and entrepreneurs play different roles to create an impact. It takes both entrepreneurs and investors to come in with a dose of humility, willing to learn and understand from one another. I have since experienced incredible partnerships with redemptive investors. We deeply respect each other's roles. We unite when challenges arise. We understand each other's expectations and needs. We openly keep each other accountable, and we genuinely care about each other, all with the intent to move an important mission forward with deep conviction. We strive for financial wins and societal impact, but we both know that God has a greater purpose beyond our own understanding. If we can enter with that posture together, the redemptive impact goes beyond the possible business outcome. Redemption and love are actually experienced in a glorifying way throughout the entire pursuit. That is what's going to make it worth pursuing. A functional entrepreneur-investor relationship is built on love and empathy. With those two virtues underlying every conversation, every decision, every idea, that's when we can build something rooted in our greatest calling, to love.
The marketplace is filled with feel-good stories about good partnerships that have given us some of the greatest innovations, products, and brands the world has ever seen. And yet, as entrepreneurs, we have a tendency to try and go it alone. We struggle with how we can weave our vision together with the hopes and desires of a partner. Whether that be diverging agendas through the growth process, trying to bring someone in after the wheels have already started to turn, partnership can be a challenge. The power of partnership is found throughout Scripture, and we know how important it is to be in community with others. What roadblocks stand in your way? What is holding you back from partnership? Is it that you just haven't found the right fit, or is there something deeper at play in your spirit? This session is an opportunity for you to share in your group about the struggles you might be dealing with. This session is an opportunity for you to share in your group about the struggles you might be dealing with when it comes to partnership. If you haven't already, open yourselves up to learning from the like-minded entrepreneurs gathering with you at this moment. Be transparent and honest with each other. What you get out of this time together will only be as enriching and life-giving as what you put into it. We'll see you next time.